Why do some scientists reject evidence for God? Scientists are not all cut of the same cloth, such that one can make general statements about them, such as all scientists regurgitate if given the smell of X. If X were a powerful puking agent, at least some scientists would nevertheless be capable of defeating the urge to vomit. On the subject of evidence for God, probably few scientists have actually been presented with material pieces of evidence of a direct nature or weighed the evidence on a scientific scale. Neither have many taken double majors as undergraduates and continued the pursuit of truth in philosophy and theology, instead specializing in science. Scientists have not generally developed strength of comprehension in matters biblical, yet some have developed faith in God anyway. It is worth considering that human beings in the modern world try very hard to seem like authorities upon everything and are more than a little adversarial and competitive in social relationships rather than individualistic in pursuit of knowledge. Scientists, too, have something of the hermit crab characteristic that make territoriality even in churches not uncommon. There is not national priesthood of believers' church organizations with egalitarian believers, objective attendance records, and tithing only for insurance and service benefit funds for members entitled to avail themselves of a certain amount for energy emergency services when necessary. Scientists have little enough knowledge of matters philosophically generally, and the same state of affairs persists in theology, the Bible, and other disciplines and life activities at which their time devotion is near to minimal. Perhaps some scientists reject things from menus at restaurants served occasionally, yet they cannot lightly reject evidence of God. If evidence were presented to them, they should think about it a little more deeply, because it may represent an eternal choice for which their negation of opportunity will have consequences beyond imagination. Scientists should not develop an opinion on evidence of anything about which they are not running an experiment if they wish to keep within rigorous experimental test procedures. If one selects an experimental test procedure with an a priori determination to reject all evidence, then it's a bit self-defeating, isn't it? Designing a scientific experiment to obtain evidence of God is an interesting concept, and one couldn't be assured of having a valid criterion for the selection of what is valid evidence without biasing the test. Jesus did mention to Satan in Luke 4:13, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." So creating test conditions for God implicitly is a bad choice. We may have a few comments about the general topic of the existence of God for those that are faithless and thinking they are pieces of meat with dull wit, regarding themselves as having no fundamental differences, that is, being endowed with spirit with metamorphic schist. Perhaps there's something of a blob, economically speaking, seeking to absorb everything in the world. Scientists could be presented with evidence for inductive reasoning without creating a test condition. More to say about criteria for experimental procedures later. If someone wrote in a giant piece of evidence infrequently to the scientific research facility in a clandestine sealed limousine in July, they find a fragment of a cocoon with a VCR that would be 1,000 miles long fully assembled. In the next year, they discover the amber stone that allows one to see angels in another universe. In year 3, a horrible fire-breathing demon repossesses the title to the home of the scientist. None of that would be evidence for the existence of God. A scientist might not reasonably reject, for the conclusion of a syllogism must be mutually exclusive and exhaustive of other possibilities. Partly other explanations for these bits of evidence exist that could have accounted for the source of the anecdotal evidence accompanied by hard facts as artifacts. Einstein's special theory of relativity, like other theories designed to explain the material world's construction, had to formulate some kind of predictions that might be tested to verify the hypothesis. The bending of light raised by gravity was considered testable. Observations of the bending of light around the sun were made by astronomers, and the special theory was often running. Developing such a test for the existence of God would be more difficult. The special theory of relativity isn't as complex or comprehensive as a criterion in which God exists pervasively, in which all things are God reduced through various stages and protocols to limiting realms of actualization, boundary conditions set by God before the beginning, when the universe was just a sparkle in God's eye, pertained through the actualization of the entire universe and future of the universe, restricting the range of inquiry and perspective from any human observer of the entirety of the phenomena, actualization of what God is and has done. As in a particular spatiotemporal theory of a scientific nature, partial truths or discoveries are only partially helpful, and criteria for the existence of God that would include definitions of God, or at least testable definitions of God, would be ineffective in providing a comprehensive or complete description of the object of the test. A partial description of God may be less than helpful. In Jesus Christ we have seen God, and that is perhaps all that will ever be comprehensible by any human being in this existence or in eternity. One wonders if the parameters for testable scientific experiments about God could even get to the point of creating a definition of God. We may consider a little symbolic logic for defining God, or about how one would at least begin an approach to define God that might provide an object reference about which one could develop tests. Does G exist? G could be simply an abstract literal value, and we will change that to A. So then we want to develop a test to prove that A exists. What is A? What are the qualities of A, and when does A appear regularly? Most physical concepts have a where and a when of occurrence and relationships to other physical objects or systems, yet what about A? A is believed to be spiritual and transcending physical appearances. In fact, A is considered by many to be everything, or the emanator of everything, such that all physical things are really spiritually based. With such criteria, we've got any particular things to test for. We haven't. What about M theory and superstring theory? In these cosmological theories, we have hope of finding a relationship to a spiritual basis for everything that exists. One are no-dimensional monads that are waveforms downloaded when selected into space-time intervals of a relativistic criteria seem like a possible place to look for a spiritually testable condition. Yet the Bible says not to put God to the test. That evidence is very practical if human beings are finite downloads from the infinite God, and if the universe is a download of apparent temporal space-time within an eternal one. How does one test for God within a criteria such as Plotinus wrote of? Scientists must give up science and become philosophers if they were even to attempt a definition for God. A is such a universal concept, and yet with a particular application in Jesus Christ, how can they hope to earn a decent living doing physical science if they're out in some forest contemplating the one?